Did you build it? Who built it? Was it moved here? Who did you sell it to? What was the style when you first built it?
Boy, do I wish it was that easy to stand and talk and ask the homeowner what was it like. But one thing I do know is that the property our home is on was owned by William Prescott. He's the one that said, "Don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes." The internet and Google. Now, I love old books to do research, but as you go on in this video and I point out some things to look at in your home, you might want to turn just to Google or the internet just to do a little more research for yourself and type in things like shape of nail heads or post and beam construction to see if you can help date your home. Now let me get comfortable before we begin.
So when I asked if any of you would be interested in learning how to research your home, who may have lived there, the age, maybe it was added on to, I was greatly surprised how many of you said yes. So here's the video, and I'm going to share some of the tips and techniques that I use to research this home and helping others with the research of their homes. And what I think I will do is I'm going to take you step by step for this particular house because I have a whole 3-ring binder put away. I'm also going to share some information about my childhood home that is also relevant to the list that I have for you. Now, keep in mind this is just a starting point for researching a home. There are so many different ways, and I'm going to put this information on my blog, and as I think of things that I may have forgotten or if I hear of new ways, I will add that to newenglandfineliving.com. So let's get started with what I did first.
Now, other than step number 1 and 2, you really can do the other steps in any order that you see fit or have time for. But the first thing I would suggest is pulling everything you have together, everything that you know about your home, and put it in chronological order. Visit the Registry of Deeds online and in office. One of the first steps I would suggest is either going online to the Registry of Deeds or visiting the Registry of Deeds if you can, or also your local town hall and looking up who used to own your home. And you could start the process by pulling your own deed and finding the book and page if you don't remember who you purchased it from. And then you would find out the previous owner's book and page, which will also then list who they bought it from, and so on. It's kind of a domino effect. Now, our particular registry only went back so far online, so into Boston I went, into the research room, and their records are going way back to pretty much when Massachusetts started keeping their records. Calling your state office or one of the large museums might be the way to go if you don't find much at the registry. Make note of the names. Throughout this video, I'm going to share some tips of things that I learned to hopefully save you some time. For instance, this deed says Louise M. Sheedy. I was looking for a Louis H. Sheedy, and I got very confused. I took the time to make this copy, and as you can see, I made a little note at the top when I finally realized this was the wrong person. They lived in the same town, on the same street, so it got very confusing. When you're reading old deeds, also keep note that a person's name that's listed either as the mortgage holder, lien holder, note holder, sometimes that is just as if they were a bank and they themselves were not the person they purchased it from. One place to look would be your town library. A lot of them have what they call the historic rooms or research rooms, and you could look there for information for town census records, old newspapers, and so on. Keep in mind that your town may have also been part of another town in the past, so you may want to check out that library as well. Now, while working on this video and also getting online with the library's website and looking at some books that they have downloaded, I came across a tidbit of information that has helped me out immensely with the history of this home. On the bottom here, it mentions that Mr. Osborne's house, then in process of framing, just across the way, blown down, and it's dated 1836. So I now know that Mr. Osborne was instrumental in either building the front portion or the back portion of our home, and I only have 6 years that I need to close because I know it was not shown on an 1830s map. Don't believe everything you see and read. During my own research, I have come across quite a bit of inaccuracies, including this next photo that's coming up. The drawing of our home is actually the wrong direction. It's L-shaped but flipped. It also states that the L addition was added 50 or 60 years prior to this assessment, which was the 1990s. We have proof from some drawings and maps that that L addition was there at least in the 1880s. Another example, if you see where it says S. Sawyer, OC, in history books it's saying that he was an occupant there and he was not the owner. In another book it says that he was in a house that was next door. I happened to find the deed that went from one owner in this home to another, and it has now been proven that S. Sawyer, Shelby Sawyer, actually lived in this house and owned it. He was not an occupant. Visit your historic society. They have books and maps and newspapers and photos. One thing I found very helpful while researching the house at the Historic Society and the library was this old drawing from, I believe it was 1882, I'll have to confirm that I found our house in. And note the addition off to the back of the house. That is one of the drawings that proved to me that the records I was reading about the addition being fairly new was inaccurate. Look for small clues to confirm things. Now we're looking at the drawing of the house on the lower left. That is our home, and I got so much information from this drawing. One was the two chimneys. The chimney on the left is no longer there, but that confirmed the marking in our attic and the fact that it was taken down to put in two bathrooms. Do you see the little dormered window in the roof? That is how I confirmed this drawing was our home. I truly thought this dormer was a newer addition to the home. That porch off to the back at one point was made into a room and added another room above it, which is now the office and the soon-to-be butler's pantry. Also note where the barn is. The barn in this photo is off to the back. In other drawings closer in time was to the side. That leads us to believe this home had two barns. One of them we believe was lost to fire, with the evidence we found during our kitchen and bedroom remodel. Old maps. When you come across old maps in your research, start looking at the streets where your home should be located and then the dates. At one point you'll find your home and then you have to backtrack to see how much further back that it might have been purchased, built there, or moved there. Another thing to keep in mind when looking at old maps is note the street names. I had trouble finding our information, one because the street name had changed over the years, and I didn't find that out until I looked at an old map. Then researching books became a little easier. There are maps called Sanborn fire maps that actually have note of where there were some major fires within towns. Now, I started looking at these when I knew we had some major fire in our home. I did not find anything about the fire, but I did find our home in a drawing that shows another building behind the barn and bay windows on our home. Speaking of bay windows, old photos. I had been searching for an old photo of our home everywhere and I couldn't find one. Finally, one of the past homeowners sent me this photo and I was so excited. It was dated circa 1940. But remember what I said, don't believe everything you read or see? Well, I was lucky enough to come across a newspaper listing for this home dated 1908 with the exact same photo. Old newspapers. And here it is, the proof that this photo was also used in a 1908 real estate ad. You know what else this proved? That this Albert Sargent who was selling the home, I started doing a little research because I have Sargent in my family. Coming to find out, this is my sixth great cousin, 3 times removed. Figure that one out. But anyway, we share a great-great-great-great-grandfather, and it's kind of neat to find out that I live in an ancestor's home and didn't know it. I also found that Luther G. Osborne, who used to own this home back in the 1830s, made $20 for taking care of the town hall and the clock. Speaking of ancestors, ancestry research companies. Now, I belong to two different ancestry research companies, and one of them has been very helpful while researching a home. I've been able to type in names of owners that I'd like to confirm lived in this town. Some of them even have the address. It's been very helpful. This service is also helpful if you're looking for town census records or other newspaper articles. I have found who's lived in the home. I have found about family members when there was two families here, and also the two rooms in the attic. I found that there were live-in servants. If possible, reach out to previous homeowners. They might be able to give you some information that you have not found, and if you're lucky enough, some of the old homeowners might reach out to you. This has happened to me twice. One was a 70-year-old gentleman who knocked on my door and told me that he used to live here when he was a young teenager in the 50s, and he told me a lot of information about the house. Another is a friend of mine. I had no idea she lived here, and we may or may not have shared some ghost stories. Look for clues from previous homeowners or contractors while remodeling. Now, this is a signature from Mr. Aiken dated 1942 that the previous homeowners found written inside of a wall during their remodeling. In my childhood home, my mother was removing wallpaper, and that home was dated 1760. She found a date in English script written in the late 1600s. Boy, do I wish that she had a photo of that. And for a homeowner down the road who's doing remodeling, I myself have tucked a note on the back of this fireplace mantle that came from my childhood home with the information and the date that I installed it in this living room. When 3 layers of ceiling finally came down, I was able to see the back wall that is the older part of our home, and you can see that this beam is chopped. It's a hand-hewn beam. Where the beam to the left, you can actually see the circular saw or bandsaw marks in it. This is another of my confirmations that the front part of the house is definitely older than the back section of the home. And also, I'm going to show you something in the basement later, which makes me believe I do have an old door in the basement. And also during our kitchen remodel, I did ask the contractors to save anything that they came across with logos and lettering so I could do some research. And this was handed to me one day. I did a little research on Clark and Wilson. They were from Portland, Oregon, and they were in business from 1929 to 1947, which kind of coincides with Mr. Aiken's construction writing that he did work here in 1942. In our dining room, what is now a hutch or a cabinet, it is so deep. I have always pretty much known this was a doorway going through to our front living room. But when the contractor cut a hole to put in some lighting for our wall sconces, I was very happy to see that not only was this door molding here on the inside, which I knew already because I've already researched this space, but when he cut a hole into this cabinet, there is paneling against the fireplace wall. Now, that is also a confirmation to me that this was a doorway. Since there is a brick shelving there that is brick further down, I'm guessing this was probably just a cabinet in the pass-through. Sometimes you'll see that in older homes. They'll have either full-length cabinets or just uppers. And there's a cabinet or a bookshelf on the other side with no doors that I'm thinking of putting doors on. So who knows, someday we may open this up. Look for clues while cleaning. Now, this is not the normal thing to find while you're cleaning. This is an ash pit that's below our beehive oven, and I figured it would have been cleaned out at one point, but I found things like clay pipe pieces, old buckles, old newspaper, old nails, pottery, you name it. But then while I kept cleaning, I came up with things also like coal, and then I found bones.
I think it's safe to say this is not a chicken bone. Found this way, way, way in the back. Okay, things are getting interesting.
After sharing this on Instagram and thinking it over, I did end up calling the police department because look, there's large bones in the fireplace, there's pieces of clothing and buckles. Your thoughts can go a little crazy sometimes, but I also thought they could have been animal bone, knowing that's where they used to cook meals. So a detective came out, he didn't know, so he sent it off to 2 different places. They finally did testing, and luckily it came back to being cow and sheep bones. Thank goodness. Look for clues while digging in the yard. Many old homes have their own dumps on them. People would just throw their trash there. These happen to be ink wells that were dug up in my childhood home, and we also found many beautiful bottles in the same location. And this horseshoe came from under a tree that had fallen over in a storm. I got out my metal detector, dug it up, and with a little research, I found out this shape was from the late 1800s. Now, where I live, finding arrowheads and old tools is nothing new. But one day I was gardening and I was working amongst a lot of stones, and I came across something to me that looked like two nostrils staring up at me. I really thought I had a petrified animal that I had come across. But upon further inspection, I dug it out, and it actually looks like it used to be a pendant to me. There's a crude hole that goes through it, and if you flip it over, it has a face carved on it, and then some actual carvings below. I don't know what that represents, chest hair, maybe, I don't know. But I did take this to somebody, and they suggested I take it to a museum. They believe this is very, very, very old. I will let you know when I find out more information. Measure your rooms to look for possible hidden rooms or hidden architectural details. I'm serious. In the home I grew up in, when my parents first bought the house, they realized that the rooms were a little bit smaller than they should be, and my father ended up knocking a hole through the wall and found a completely hidden room that had an old table, a chair, spectacles, tin cup, even an antelope horn. We then found a little secret passage going from that room downstairs to the kitchen. And you see that mantle in the right-hand picture? That's also in my childhood home. And my mother and I were realizing one day that the wall was extra thick there. And the room was already finished off. This is when they first moved in. We ended up knocking a hole through the wall and found behind it a big, beautiful fireplace that my mother ended up doing over. And that mantle is now currently in this home. I have moved it with me from home to home as a fake fireplace. I used it in my stores as a prop. It is now in its forever home, and this is the mantle. I have a note on the back talking about my childhood home, how I came about bringing it there, and why I put it up. Look in parts of your home least modified, such as your attic or your basement. Look for clues for age, such as nails, floorboard width, framing construction, and so on. Now, I'll be the first to admit that a previous homeowner could have put this door in from an architectural salvage company. But I did have an architect come to our home, and he saw this, and he firmly believes that this door was the original outside door before the addition was put on. Also, we know that the basement floor was raised and concrete put in. There's even this old lock that somebody put into the floor, and yes, I had to dig it out to see if there was anything under it, and no, there wasn't. In the attic, it's the only space that I've found 16-inch floorboards. The rest of the house, it's been touched and remodeled over the years, so I loved seeing these big wide floors. Also in the attic is the last of the beautiful old doors that this house once had. I love seeing the old handles and the paneled doors. Door knockers and boot scrapers. One thing I didn't know is that certain door knockers in the day also meant the profession of who lived in the home. Somebody saw this door knocker and told me that a doctor once lived in our property. I ended up doing the research, and yes, a Dr. Goby did live in our home, and he actually had his dental practice in the home. We also have boot scrapers at each entry. Now, yes, you can still get those, and people can still have them installed, but if you have an old home, most likely you have the original.
In a future video, you're going to see some Halloween decorating ideas that I've done in my past homes. I figured that since I never have time to really share in time, because I don't like to decorate early enough to get them on Instagram and Pinterest. I like to do it real time. So I'm going to share some videos and some photos from the past just to maybe inspire some of you. Some are natural home decor items for Halloween, some are for the fall, some are really glammy glitzy. They're all different. And that's what I like to do, a little different every year. I don't even know what I'm doing this year yet. I'm turning 55. I'll probably have a cocktail party if quarantine isn't really on lockdown again, so we'll have to see. If you haven't already, I would appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. It shows YouTube that you like what I'm doing. And if you give it a thumbs up, it will show others that you like what I'm doing. So please support this channel any way you can, even if you comment below. Until next time, kindred spirits, thank you for visiting.